field of sky blue, emblazoned with the crest of the United Earth Empire. This is the UEE flag. But what if I were to tell you that this is a bad flag? Well, hold on a minute, Jail. How can the flag that flew over Vega 2 when it was attacked by the Vandal be considered a bad flag? Well, it would be in good company. Of the 49 states of the United States that currently have a flag, only 11 of them could be considered good flags. The problem is that it's a UEE seal on a background. Real nations will often have different symbols for different purposes. For example, the United States has a flag, a coat of arms and a great seal, all of which get used in different locations for different purposes. Of these, the flag is usually the most minimalist and symbolic rather than declarative. So who gets to say what is a good flag or a bad flag? Well, there's no law on it, but a group of people who have some pretty well-informed opinions on it are the North American Vexillological Association, who, as well as having a really great flag, also publish a guide called Good Flag, Bad Flag, which gives you 5 simple rules for designing the best flag possible. In this video, I'm going to look through at how the UEE flag stacks up against these 5 basic principles, consider whether or not this means it should be changed, and discuss possible alternatives. Rule number 1. Keep it simple, ideally so that a child can draw it from memory. This is in part a practical consideration. A flag will often be viewed under less than ideal circumstances, when it's blowing around, when it's at a distance, or when it's furled up, and it should still be recognisable in all of these situations. A simple flag is still easy to recognise. I've shown you the UEE flag a number of times so far in this video, and you're probably already familiar with the seal, but can you remember the 3 concentrically organised designs around the central UEE lozenge? You might remember that the outermost is a wreath, but can you remember how many leaves it has? The answer is there's a circle divided into 4 segments, and then a double wreath with 6 pairs of leaves on each branch. These are beautiful and even quite minimalist ideas for a seal, but not good elements for a flag. Therefore, the UEE flag fails on the first criteria. Rule number 2. Use meaningful symbolism. Ideally, every part of your flag should say something about your organisation or country. The UEE flag is obviously based off the UN flag, and each element of the UN flag means something. The colour is chosen as the opposite of what was considered the colour of war, red. There's a wreath which is supposed to be an olive wreath of peace, and a map of the world using a projection which doesn't give undue prominence to either the US or the Soviet Union, and was really quite politically considered. Now, the UEE flag does have some symbolism. There's another wreath which is probably a laurel wreath of victory in reference to the Roman Empire. The blue could be the UN's use of it for peace, or it could represent Earth, the great blue dot. The lines don't have any clear symbolism. However, there's a darker side to this symbolism. As far as we know, this was also the flag of the UEE under the Messer regime, so there's a dark past to it, and it's not clear whether you'd really want to continue that past on. A lot of countries will, after changing their form of government or gaining independence, change their flag. And indeed, when I showed you 49 states of the US earlier, the one that doesn't have a flag currently is because their governments decided that they don't want to associate themselves with the symbols within it. So I think that it's debatable whether it's good on this criteria. There is symbolism there, but it's not clear whether that symbolism is something that they want to use in the future. Rule number 3. Use 2 to 3 basic colours. This is more of a guideline than a rule because there are some really great flags that use more than 2 or 3 colours. However, it's more saying you'll be safe if you only use 2 or 3. And the UEE flag, of course, only uses 2, and so I think it gets a pass on this criteria. Rule number 4. No lettering or seals. This isn't going to go well for the UEE flag, is it? Of the US state flags I showed you earlier, all of the bad flags have lettering on them, and even the one which I was being kind to. There's a real practical purpose not to use lettering. First off, if you're viewing the flag from the other direction, the lettering might look backwards, and also if you're viewing it from a distance, you lose that lettering, so what's the point in having that unnecessary complication? However, there's also a philosophical reason not to use lettering. The USA flag has meaning behind each of those symbols. If you are just resorting to printing the name of a country or an organisation on a field, you're kind of admitting you can't think of how to symbolise it. So this is like admitting defeat and kind of missing the purpose of what a symbol is meant to do. The UEE flag is just a seal on a field, so it really shouldn't be considered a good flag for this criteria. Rule number 5. Be distinctive or be related. You either want to show where you came from or not be confused with someone else. The UEE flag has definite design DNA from the UN flag, and there's a somewhat in-law reason for this. The United Nations of Earth became the United Planets of Earth, which became the UEE. However, there is some problem with this genealogy. First of all, the United Nations of Earth used iconography that was very different to the United Nations. And secondly, it's kind of implied that the UNE was not actually derived from the United Nations, but rather as an agglomeration of some superstates. So this kind of breaks down. This kind of calls into question the relationship between the UN and the UEE flags, because they don't represent the same things, they don't have much in common, and they're not necessarily related to each other. As an empire, the UEE flag should also be able to be modified for use in other circumstances. Here the seal is really effectively used as the central part of the different branches of the military. However, the flag itself is perhaps a bit crowded already to be used as something which you could be modified for different states. So I think again, this distinctive relation question, it becomes debatable whether that's a good thing and how it's doing, if we're kind. So on a scorecard, the UEE flag is definitely failing at 2 criteria, it's succeeding at 1, and it's debatable how it's doing on the other 2. So this means it's not as bad as the worst flags in the world, but it's certainly not as good as some of the best flags in the world. Does this really mean that we should change it though? There's plenty of reason not to want to change it. It's already in use, it's about as good as many real-world flags, and the rules of real flags don't really matter in a game. This isn't a gameplay consideration, it's a set design consideration. However, it is a bad flag, so that might be a reason you want to change it. And a better flag would provide ample opportunity for planetary or system flags, which could give you a better idea of where you are just looking around your environment. But I think the real reason that tips over into why I think we should change it is the narrative and community opportunities inherent in thinking about changing it. Any new flag design could be put to a vote or could be even fan design, which would add to the ever-improving list of ways that we've had community engagement through competitions that are beyond just screenshot competitions. There's also a good narrative opportunity to diegetically change the flag from within law. At the moment, we're leading up to the 2950 Imperator election, and there's 2 candidates whose platforms would gel with the idea of updating the flags. First of all, you've got Myra No, who, because she's from the centre-left reformist party, which is the transitionalist, she's probably going to want to move away from the symbols of Mesa. And previously, she's argued for greater planetary autonomy regarding calendars and timekeeping, so I think the idea of rolling out sort of a flag for every planet or system would be in her wheelhouse, as well as changing the central UEE flag. And another candidate who I think this would go well with would be Ileana Sharad. So she's a centre-right reformist from the Universalist Party, but her main policy is one of promoting greater devolution and having more power for the local governments. So perhaps by encouraging those governments to adopt a local symbol, they would also be in line with those policies. Her party is fundamentally quite nationalist, and perhaps they recognise that the UEE as a big thing is maybe something they can't get everyone behind, but they might be able to strengthen the whole empire by encouraging local pride. So I think both of these candidates would be in favour of having not only a new and better UEE flag, but flags for each planet and system which are derived from that UEE flag. So what could the flag look like? Well, a couple of years ago there was a conversation about that on the forums. I'll link to that in the description. And in that I came up with this design, which I call the thin red line. This is a non-rectangular flag, which I think is a little bit more sci-fi, and each colour band represents a different aspect of humanity. So the blue represents the origins on Earth, the white the illumination of our progress, a little bit of a manifest destiny idea there, the red being the military separating us from the dangers of the black, the space, the mysteries and dangers of the world. And the chevron shape gives a sense of progress and forward motion. I think this design works really well because it works vertically, and its broad fields and simple shapes mean that you can quite easily riff on the colours or add defacing designs to give a load of different symbols for different planets. You can even create relationships within those designs. So this would be my suggestion for a new flag. And while I think that we should change the UEE flag, I would never, of course, suggest changing the widely used UEE seal, which was a really brilliant design by Clint Schultz. So that's my opinion on the UEE flag. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more random law weirdness like this.